Well, I'm excited to introduce you to a new friend in my world, Kevin Weaver with the Warrior's Journey. Kevin, welcome.
Pastor Allen, great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we are delighted to have you. We tried to make this work last year. We were doing a Veterans Day special for TBN, and General Boykin strongly recommended that we include you in that, but we couldn't make the schedules work. So it's great to have you in Murfreesboro.
Yeah, I was really disappointed. I was thankful that it's working out here today. This is great.
Tell us a little bit about Warrior's Journey, what you do, and I know that's a big part of your life these days. So
it is. You know, I was introduced to the military my younger years. No one in my family, direct family, other than going back to my great-great-grandfather, who was a Civil War colonel, actually, out of a militia in Michigan years ago. I actually have a picture of him with their youngest daughter, which was my great-grandmother. She was born in 1862, and it's a really crazy picture. But other than that, I mean, there was a real big gap in military connection. But my dad was an aerospace engineer. He worked for LTV, Lockheed, General Dynamics, and he was one of the engineers that worked on the F-16 back several decades ago. And so he was always exposed. And so through that and watching my dad kind of be involved in aerospace, I really kind of became a real, what's the word? Just a hobbyist, if you will, of the aviation, the whole aviation world. Really enjoyed that and took some flying lessons. Actually had my private license for a little while. I can't keep it current because it's not practical and doesn't, it's pretty expensive, these days, but just enjoy the whole aviation area. So when I graduated from high school, went to college for a couple of years, studied engineering, kind of a long story in between that I'll just do in 10 seconds. When I was 16, I actually came to Christ. I grew up in a Catholic home. And so didn't really know what being a Christian, born again, and having a relationship with God, but I had a really dear friend of mine in high school who led me to the Lord during kind of the Jesus Revolution post years, in the mid-late 70s. And so then really just had a different heart. I'd actually applied to the Air Force Academy and was going to pursue a potentially career in the Air Force as a pilot was my dream. But as we move forward, I just feel like God rearranged that. So my dad wasn't really too happy about that. He was a little like, what's going on here? Didn't think I was making some great decisions. There was a lot of stuff happening back then too, a lot of misunderstanding. And of course, our heritage as Roman Catholics did not necessarily jive with the evangelical, expression of faith, but it was transformational for me. So, my pastor was very wise. He said, hey, just trust your dad, submit to him, honor him, and God will use that. My response was, well, yeah, but he doesn't understand what I feel like God's calling me to. He said, hey, God will use him. Remember the Bible says to honor your father and mother, and you live long.
That's good coaching.
It was really great. So that was, that's how I ended up going into the military. My dad, after my first year of college, could see that, that it wasn't something I was super I was just kind of wandering, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I felt led to a ministerial, I thought maybe at some point I'd be in ministry. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I wanted to do something to serve God, So he said, why don't you go in the military? And I'm like, well, Dad, I had my shot at that. He said, no, I want you to enlist. And I'm like, enlist? I thought, well, if I'm going to go in, I'm going to be a pilot. I'm going to fly airplanes. But when he said it, I just knew it was God, and trusted the Lord, and ended up enlisting and went in the Air Force, just jumped on the first job they offered me, which was basically military police, security forces, and then worked in the investigative role there. Went to Panama, Central America. I was the only one in my flight that when I finished my schooling that got shipped overseas. I really didn't want to go overseas. Ended up going overseas. But that was monumental. Got involved with some amazing missionaries and different things that were happening there in country while I was doing my job in the Air Force.
Panama?
In Panama, Central America, yeah. So lived there from 82 to 87. And then when I got back, met my wife, got out. I just extended 3 times. That's the only duty station I had in all my time. I never really went anywhere else. And there was a lot happening back in the Noriega years,
Yes, I remember.
Yeah. So then 1990, we went back. My wife had never been, but we'd only been married a couple of years, just had our first child. And we had an opportunity after the invasion to go back, and we pastored. That was our first pastorate. I'd finished Bible school, and we had started a college ministry at the University of Kansas, and just cutting our teeth on what it meant to really be in ministry and just loving people to Jesus, And then we had this opportunity to do this, and it was that was my first pastorate, pastoring American military personnel, and we did that for several years. It was a great introduction. So
what organization were you with?
So we were with the Assemblies of God. And we went as world missions, and generally appointed missionaries, and
that is awesome.
Yeah, that was a really great experience. Then came home and got involved with church planting, church revitalization, and then 32 years of pastoral ministry, but always connected to the military community. We just had this heart. Never really encouraged our kids, to serve that way, but we encouraged them to serve, be servants, and so all three of our boys. They all three had scholarships, ROTC scholarships to college. They decided they wanted to do that, and I didn't really talk a whole lot about my own personal military service. In a sense that, hey, this is a tradition or anything. Some families are like that, and that's great. Nothing wrong with that. But we just said, hey, we don't care if you drive a garbage truck. Just make sure you're serving God and doing what God wants you to do. So every position has an importance, and so. But my oldest son, he got med boarded out. He has an acute allergy to walnuts. So Air Force wouldn't take him. We were really excited because he was going to join the Air Force, So, and then he said, well, I'm going to go to the Army. They wouldn't take him. And he said, oh, Dad, I'm really spoiled goods if the Army won't even take me, So that was kind of funny. So now he's a worship leader at a church using his gifts, his talents, and his wife. They're doing great. And then my middle son and younger son are both serving active duty. They're commissioned officers in the Army. So,
well, thank you for your service.
Well,
makes a difference.
It's an honor. It was an honor. Still,
we have some roots in the same part of the world. You're in Springfield, Missouri?
That's right. That's our headquarters right now. I'm from Michigan originally. My wife's from Kansas, but we ended up kind of landing in Springfield, which was just kind of a central location we thought would be a good area.
Well, my family all comes from that part of the world, so
that's amazing.
Springfield. So.
Yeah, the Show Me State. That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Stubborn as a Missouri mule, I think is what people say to me, but we won't go there for today.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you pastored then in the Northwest too. You were on a church staff in a large church there.
Yes, we actually,
church.
When we came home from Panama, we were there for several years, came home at the end of 92, 93, and then I helped with a church plant in Springfield, started with about 80 people in a roller rink, and when we left 5.5 years later, it was running about 6,500 and gone through several building programs, and I was kind of partnering with another gentleman by the name of John Lindell, who's still the pastor there. We're dear friends, and I was just there to help him out. I said, "Hey, I'll help you get this thing going." And then 5 years, I said, "You don't need me anymore. We're going to go." And then we ended up going to the Washington State region, and we did 2 church revitalization areas there, and both of those were God just really blessed and successful, and then huge military presence there too. That was another reinforcement. Didn't really see the Warrior's Journey coming, quite honestly. Didn't really have that in our hearts and minds. But when we left there, we did a couple of church plants that were really exciting. Our particular denomination said, "Hey, we'd like you to help us develop this thing called Church Multiplication Network." And they started getting into church planning. Will you help us? We thought that would be really exciting, hard work, but great. We were always just open to going wherever the need was, and so God, thank you for helping us kind of do that. That was always our theme. And then my father-in-law got sick, and we ended up going back to Kansas. He was a retired administrator, took on a rural church when he retired and did really great. So we thought we'll go there for a year and, kind of help them transition, help my father-in-law retire, and then we'll see what God has for us. We were actually thinking about going back into missions, and then we were there 6 years, and I thought, God, are you mad at me? I wasn't sure what was going on.
Stuck in Kansas?
We were just trying to be faithful, but through that time, it was really great, but it was a rural church. We had one service on Sunday mornings, all farmers, super busy people that were all, they're very, working long, hard days. And so even to suggest
strength of our nation.
Yeah, it was great. Really great people. But through that time, God was preparing us for what we're doing now. And then in 2014, the door blew open, and we've been amazed ever since.
So you bring a really strong faith background and ministry background into the Warrior's Journey.
Absolutely. We knew that we had looked, and everything from Wounded Warrior Project, Folds of Honor, Tunnels to Towers. These are some of the more popular, well-known veteran service organizations. I started doing some research because of my nephew. My nephew joined the Marine Corps in 2002, right out of high school. He ended up being in the Battle of Fallujah in 2004. He was one of 7 in his platoon that either wasn't killed or wounded. And his company commander was actually killed, and came home, and he was struggling. And he said, "Hey, Uncle Kevin, can we go take a motorcycle ride? Because I need to talk to you. You're the only other one in our family that has had any military experience." And, being a Marine, I thought, well, I was actually pretty honored that, he'd ask an Air Force guy to go hang out with him and talk to him about military service.
I think Marines counted the Air Force as military.
And he'd probably have some things to say about that if he was here right now. Okay. We joke, but it was a really good insight. I didn't know what to expect, but he started talking about the trauma and the post-traumatic stress that he was dealing with, some moral injury issues that he was dealing with. And I just listened. I didn't really know what to say. And I felt a check about not trying to fix it, which is really what my desire and my tendency was like, how do I help him? But I just listened and prayed with him. But it was transformational for him. That was a really big step for his healing. And we had quite a few more of those conversations. And so that was really an idea that I feel like God was beginning to put into my head that, hey, not everybody needs to be medicated. Not everybody needs to go through an intensive inpatient behavioral health type of experience. Probably most, if not all of these guys at some point just need someone to talk to engage with, because as we all know, this is something that we've discovered too, that the military has a very unique way of creating unique challenges that most people don't understand. And not just civilians, but even people in the military don't necessarily really understand what it is they're going through. So having a trusted relationship was really important.
Very good.
So that's kind of how it all began. And so we began to really pray and think and started doing some research and discovered that there are over 40,000 registered veteran service organizations in the U.S. And we're like, whoa, man, maybe there's not a need. We just need to find the right ones. And as we looked, that's how we discovered Mighty Oaks, which was fantastic. And then we discovered, Reboot Combat Recovery and Soft Missions out of Florida and there's several great faith-based, because we felt like Christ was an important part of the process. Sure. And so we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but where we saw maybe a gap was in how do we get individuals who are living outside in the shadows, and how do we get them to think about engaging with these organizations that can help them. And, Chad has done amazing work, at Mighty Oaks. I mean, his story, in fact, I went through the program myself, have taken several others with me to go through that. Many of our leaders have gone through it, and it's a phenomenal thing. In fact, we're helping him do now the aftercare for a lot of that. So, because that was one of the areas that he felt was just needed more. So that's kind of how it all began.
This is the mental health, really, of our vets, when they transition out.
Yes.
They come from that intense, highly regulated, regimented world.
Yeah. And, Pastor Al, that's a really good word, because I think that we would say, yes, mental health if we're talking to the VA, but if we're just talking between you and me here and people in the church, we're
a few thousand of our friends. But
exactly. Exactly. And all that would be listening here on this podcast is really we focus on how do we help heal invisible wounds, knowing that Jesus Christ came to heal us, and we know that he can heal our soul, because there's a damaging thing that happens when you're exposed to warfare on any level, whether you're a trigger puller or supporting that. And many times we don't really understand. It's not just what people see, but what they do and what maybe they didn't do, what didn't happen. We're dealing with a lot of guys right now that are struggling because they're not getting deployed, and they feel like they're not doing their job and they're not having the opportunity. So it's a really interesting, complex kind of world. And we did some powerful research. I'll just share this real quick little story. So as we began, we thought, hey, the Warrior's Journey, this is great. Had this opportunity. There was a missions organization called Network 211, and it's a world outreach mission that uses the internet to evangelize the world. And they courted us and said, would you come help us? And we want to really help. We'd like for you guys to focus on the military. And I'm like, that really resonates with me. In fact, we've been thinking about this. And so they gave us the resources to kind of get this going. So I said, we really need to do some research. So I had one guy that I had kept in contact with who was a chaplain, and he was at the Pentagon at the time. And he had been assigned as an attaché to the deputy chief of chaplains there at the Pentagon. And I said, hey, I think what we need to do is just understand this better. So I called Brad Lewis is his name. In fact, he's a colonel now. He's getting ready to retire here in a few months. I said, Brad, love to come talk to you. I know you're working with the deputy chief and the chief. I said, I'd like to do a survey, because I in my heart, I just believe it's more than post-traumatic stress. I know. He goes, oh my goodness, it's so much more. And he started talking about, his experience as a kind of a subject matter expert here as a chaplain. He was exposed to, in fact, he was a chaplain assigned to Special Forces units. And so he had deployed and been overseas 15 times with these guys at this point. So I said, I'd love to get your input. So went to the Pentagon, had this whole plan, laid it out, and I said, "Hey, let's go are we going to talk to the deputy chief today?" He goes, "Yeah, that's not really the way it works." I said, "Well, let me have the material, and maybe in 2 or 3 months you can come back and we'll try to get this open door." And I'm like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Of course," Then it hit me. It's like, yeah, things move pretty slow. So we were walking around. He was giving me a little tour, and this is what's so cool because and I'll just share this story, but it's one of thousands of stories that were subsequent to this experience. Walking down the hallway, all of a sudden there's this guy, and if you've ever been to the Pentagon, it's a huge place. You visited, I'm sure. It's a massive place with people everywhere. And all of a sudden, this guy walking down, and he happened to be this 1-star general, and had a chaplain, cross on his uniform, and he's Chaplain Lewis. You lost, and it was the deputy chief who he worked for, and he said, "No, but I want to introduce someone to you. This is a divine appointment, And he said, "Well, great," because he's got a great idea on how to help fill the gaps on some invisible wounds issues. And so he said, "Okay, you got 45 seconds. What's your idea? Go." Yeah, exactly.
Instant in season and out of season.
Exactly. And at that point, I'm just thinking, what? And I don't know what I said, but that turned into a 40-minute conversation right there in the hallway. And at the end of that 40-minute conversation, he was handing me his card saying, "Hey, we'll think about this." And he's handing me his card. He says, "You look really familiar." And I thought the same thing. I said, "You look familiar too, sir." He says, "Well, were you in the military?" I said, "I was in the Air Force." "Well, where were you stationed?" I said, "Well, I was in Panama." He goes, "Well, we were in Panama." I said, "Really? Well, when?" And I said, "Well, I was there 82 to 87. And then, and he said, "Well, I didn't get there until 1991. I said, "Well, we went back and we actually pastored a church in Panama to American military." And he says, "Yes, you did. Coakley Community Chapel." He goes, "Your wife's name is Cayenne," which is a kind of an interesting name. She goes, "You were my pastor." And cool. We're like, "Chaplain Soldier, yes, you were captain." He said, "Yes." So Brad Lewis, my buddy's like, "What is happening?" He was like, "What is going on?" He just was blown away by that. But that was then the beginning. And God spoke to my heart at that point. He said, "Everything you've done to this point, to this day, all the relationships will now culminate. And it's all going to now be at this crossroads of developing this ministry that I've called you to do." And so we feel like we've come into our final chapter of ministry to lay this legacy and significance for our military members and their families.
That is so important. I think we live in a time where authority is being questioned in an unprecedented way, from defund the police to we hear the most powerful leaders in our nation say they've never been proud of our nation. And that has to have an impact on the men and women serving in the military.
Devastating.
And so I think to come alongside them and to be a strength to them, it is so important. I think those knuckleheads that we hear say those kind of things represent such a tiny percentage of our country. The overwhelming majority of the people I interact with are grateful for the men and women who serve.
Yeah. But there's this chipping away, though, even in our media, now there's, we should have never been in Iraq. Why did we ever go? It was a mistake. And all that, there may be truth to all that. And on the political side, or even on the logistical side of what's important to national security. I mean, I understand those are important decisions we need to reflect upon. But then when you get media people that's, we've been in forever wars and it's just it's just a big scam. Well, what they don't understand when they say that is the sacrifices and the experiences that hundreds of thousands of men and women have made to bring good to those areas, including I've watched it in my nephew, my sons. There's eight deployments, between my kids, alone, watching what they've invested in, feeling very dedicated to helping those people. And it's almost like saying, well, what you didn't matter. That's why the pull from Afghanistan was so devastating, I think.
Yes, humiliating. Yeah. So there's never been a nation in history that has rebuilt the nations that it has defeated on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And that's been our legacy.
That's right.
I mean, after world wars, after smaller conflicts, smaller if you're not in them. But I mean, we have been a force for good, and our military has been a force for good.
Yes.
And it is really reprehensible that the media and Hollywood, the storytellers amongst us, don't tell that story. They prefer to demean and to denigrate, to make fun of.
Yes.
It is a tragic. I've lived in Israel, and everybody there when they graduate high school serves in the military, both the men and women. And a part of their military service is to teach them their national history. You'll see the Israeli soldiers all over the country, exploring the various aspects. It's a relatively young nation, but I really think that would be a wonderful thing. Easy for me to say, I'm old enough, it's not going to affect me. But I think for our young people to be taught to love our nation and be taught the best things about our history and not the darkest chapters. Yes. I mean, there are some dark chapters, but overwhelmingly, we've been a force for good in the world.
Well, and even in the dark chapters, Pastor Allen, I mean, I think you would agree with this. I know you would resoundingly agree with this. That the dark chapters were areas where we faced our failures and overcame. I mean, I had a conversation with a lady on an airplane just a couple of weeks ago, and she was a very nice lady, but she was one of these folks that felt like, hey, because of slavery and all that, we're doomed. We were doomed. It's just a lie. It was all a lie. I said, no, wait a minute. I said, so what do you think? What do you think needs to fix that? Well, there's a price that needed to be paid. And I said, so you don't think that the 480,000 individuals who shed their blood on the battlefields of this nation in the Civil War wasn't a price to be paid? I said the second inaugural address from Abraham Lincoln reflected on that. And she literally just sat back. She goes, I really never thought about it that way. I said, we've paid a big price, and look how far we've come. And we have to go farther. I'm all for that. I want to do exactly what God wants us to do, to love each other and to bring that to a point of central focus on who Jesus is. I mean, that's the only thing that's going to bring us to that place. But,
absolutely.
And she was like, okay, yeah, maybe you're right on that. I said, well, just think about it, So that's what I love about our military, because it represents that. And it's not just fighting wars and winning wars, although that's our primary purpose, to have a military and to defend our nation and to bring security to our nation, but the good that comes. I mean, I was just in Vietnam with Dave Reaver just a few months ago. And the things that have happened in Vietnam because of our presence there. Now, was there some tragic things? Of course. It was a horrible time in our history, and a lot of devastating things and a lot of repercussions in individuals' lives. But I'll tell you, the good that came to that country today, and even and Dave Reaver will tell you this. He goes, I have tremendous relationships with the communist regime here because they know that we are here to help them, and they're taking the help. So you're right. I wish we could focus on that more.
Maybe we can start that. The more we tell the story, the more that we tell the truth.
Yes.
There's just a lot of confusion and a lot of bad information. Last century, 100 million people died as a result of communism in our world.
Yeah.
And that's not speculation. Those are hard numbers that pretty much everybody agrees on.
Yeah.
Socialism, they're trying to tell us these days, is popular. In fact, equity is kind of the fancy new word for socialism. Yep. It's a failed system. Everywhere it's existed in a widespread way, it's led to suppression of free speech. It's led to propaganda. It's led to the diminishment of people, the diminishment of church and the Christian faith. I mean, there's a track record.
Yeah.
And we've got to be a bit more awake. But
comes, I think, down to personal responsibility. It alleviates the need for me to be personally responsible for my faith, for my character, for my life. If someone's going to do it for me, they're going to hand it to me on a silver platter. That's not liberty. That's not.
It's not Christianity.
No,
Christianity will deliver you from victimhood.
That's right.
We all suffer at the hands of evil.
That's
but the power of the cross is to deliver us.
That's right.
There's a greater power at work within us to forgive and to be forgiven. It's a wonderful message.
Yeah, it's a good word.
So I want to come back to the Warriors journey for just a minute, because I know you've got facilities not only in the United States, but even in Germany.
We do. You've
got a rapid deployment strategy mentality. That's interesting to me.
We do. We just want to. We feel like over now the last 8 years, I hesitate to say that we're subject matter experts at this point. I don't know that that's the case, but I do feel like we've learned something that is working phenomenally. We have over 1,700 suicide intervention experiences with individuals that have connected to our ministry, and over 1,756, I think, was the last one. We had 9 this week. So just to give you an idea of the severity of this pandemic, really there's a suicide pandemic here really that we're dealing with. But we've had a 100% success rate. We haven't lost one person. So intervention and crisis intervention.
You have a 100% success rate?
So far, we have not lost one individual.
Is that the best you can do? Can't you up your game a little bit?
Well, here's the thing that haunts me. There's going to be a day that where maybe I'm going to say, hey, we've only lost 1 or 2 or 3, but our goal is to maintain that rate. And listen, I say that it's not because of the greatness of the Warriors Journey, because we, in a sense, we really don't have a whole lot to do with that. It all is because of what we're introducing to these individuals. Number one, a trusted relationship. That there's an individual who is being a champion of their success. Secondarily, that individual, that warrior connector that we train, their whole goal is to get them connected to their spiritual thinking, and then ultimately to Christ, being the center of that cornerstone of our spiritual existence. And then how do we help them to thrive, not manage, not be medicated, but to be healed of these areas of trauma. That research that we did, by the way, which through the Pentagon, which happened actually the next day after my meeting with General Soldier, which was phenomenally amazing.
You should go wander around the Pentagon more often.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? But we were able to do an amazing survey. The Harvard School of Business crunched the numbers for us, gave us these tremendous data. It's an empirical study that we gave back to the military, and we had the top 12 challenging, what we call invisible wounds challenges. PTSD was number 10 out of 12. Isolation, number 1. Family brokenness, number 2. Moral injury. Transitional issues, identity. These are all way above. In fact, sometimes we feel like those are additives or things that contribute to post-traumatic stress. And so we've addressed that. We built a website. We have over 7,000 articles and video testimonies of individuals. There's power in story. So we feel like through a relationship, through story, when someone like Chad did, and what he's continuing to do, telling his story is an encouragement for someone to feel. And then when they hear it, they say, hey, now that's not exactly my story, but I relate. And if God could do that for him, maybe he could do that for me. And so that it's simple. It's just going back to those premises, but we have to do that in their language, right? We have to do it in a way that makes sense to them. And so we've come with a group of warrior to warrior. And so we're scaling that. So to answer your question, yes, we opened up 4 years ago a resiliency center in Kaiserslautern, just outside of Ramstein Air Base, and right down the road from the Landstuhl Battlefield Hospital there. And we have about 250 to 300 people a day that go through that facility. We have workshops, 6-7 workshops every night. It's a coffee shop by day, workshop facility at night. We're partnering with the USO, the 25th Sustainment Command, NATO forces, AFRICOM's headquarters is right there. So it's right very central. 80,000 active duty military personnel and their families are right there in that location. So we want to replicate that in Korea and Okinawa. We want to do that as well in every military facility that's in the U.S. in the next 10 years. Our goal is to replicate that by 20 is our goal. So it's a big goal, but we feel like with God's help, we feel like we can achieve it. It's just a matter of, time and resources, and if the Lord will enable us, that's our commitment, because we just want to scale it. We want to let people know that you have a place you can come to find. And then we don't answer all those questions. That's why it's important. Our mantra is, look, our core value is it's the individual, number one. Secondarily, it's we believe you can be healed, and God is the center of that. Third is partnership, strategic. We can't do everything, but we can create an environment where we can offer a robust opportunity to coach you to a place that's individual, customized to you. We don't want to cookie cutter this. We're going to triage. Who are you? What is God doing in your life? And what next steps need to happen? Now, I think everybody should go through Mighty Oaks because it's just a great program. But from that, there's a lot of different avenues and roads that we can help people find that discovery, and that's what we're seeing, and it's been fantastic.
Well, I'm a huge champion for the way you bring faith to bear on the military community and our veterans. We've been struggling with this, I think, completely misplaced idea that we want to separate our faith from our lives, that it needs to belong in the church, but we don't want it involved in the government, our education, or our corporate settings. Right. And we see all of those places having deteriorated dramatically as our faith has been removed from those arenas. And we are dependent upon the military if we're going to live in freedom with liberty.
Yes.
And so I am a huge advocate for faith being available to those men and women who stand watch on our behalf.
Yeah. The good news too, Pastor, on that note, I'll tell you, is that we're finding we are now a licensed DoD vendor. We are a licensed VA vendor. We had 54 government contracts last year where they're contracting us now to do resiliency workshops, talks, everything from a few hours to 5 days of intensives around the country, around the world. Just got back from Germany, and we did all the chaplaincy. We do a care of the caregiver for the chaplaincy, and it was they gave us 2 years ago. They gave us one workshop. A couple years ago, they gave us 3. This year, they gave us the whole program.
Awesome.
And so God's moving, and I think helping these individuals, especially deal with this suicide issue. One last thing I'll share, because I think it's maybe important for people to be aware of the not just the intensity, but the necessity of doing something now. There's an urgency. We had 7,776 killed in action casualties in the global war on terror in Afghanistan and in Iraq. We've had over 34,000 of that same group of individuals who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan come home and take their own lives. Complete suicide. 4 times our combat deaths have happened.
Okay, say that again. We had fewer than 8,000 combat deaths.
Yeah, and over 34,000 suicides.
That is unbelievable.
And then in addition to that, you talk about pre-9/11 veterans, my generation and back, Vietnam, Korea, an additional 50,000 of those individuals have taken their lives since 2001. So over 80,000. But nobody wants to talk about it because it just makes the VA, it just makes them look like they're not doing their job. And they are they're doing a great, I get VA care. I get physical VA care. It's awesome. I don't want to bash the VA. I'm thankful for the efforts that they're making. But when it comes to soul care, it's a big fat zero. and my thing is, it's like, guys, just stop. Do what you do well. Let us come alongside and let the church come alongside. Let believers come alongside to bring health and wholeness, because Jesus said, I'll build my church, and military members need the church too.
Amen. It's not bashing the VA. It's not bashing anybody. We have to acknowledge the facts.
Yes.
In order to get to a better solution.
Amen.
And if the weapons and armor you were being given were failing at that rate, there would be a tremendous amount of scrutiny and change.
Yes.
And that to me sounds like a huge cry for help and awareness. So thank you. If somebody wants to know more about the Warrior's Journey,
yes,
what's the simplest way to find that out?
Love to just tell you, listen, it's for military members, active duty, veterans, and their families. We work with a lot of wives, spouses, kiddos, moms and dads, grandparents. There's not a whole lot of support for all those folks. We try to encompass all of that. So you can go to our website. It's very simple, twj.org. Very simple. You'll notice that there's QR codes on there, or you can go to, it says Let's Talk. There's a red Let's Talk button on all of our pages. It's a simple form. It literally takes 10 seconds to tell us who you are. And as soon as you hit submit, really within minutes, you're going to be talking to someone on our team, on our global team, that's going to be saying, hey, how can we help you? And we get them connected to someone of like experience to start that triage process.
So twj.org.
twj.org. Yeah, thewarriorsjourney.org, TWJ. Or if they type in The Warrior's Journey, it's just easier to do TWJ. So
Read by Google will help either way.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. So love to help and assist. And if we can't directly intervene, we will help you to find someone who can. We're going to be there with you. We'll become your personal advocate as far as the journey, as far as you want us to be a part of that journey. Hence the Warrior's Journey. We're here to journey with you as long as you allow us. So that's our goal.
Well, my guest today is Kevin Weaver. I'm sorry.
At no cost. I was going to say at no cost to them either. That's important too, because people say, well, how much is that? I said zero. I mean, we have churches, individuals, we have corporate sponsors. All of that is paid for by, we kind of have a mantra. Listen, civilians, if you never served in the military, here's your opportunity. It's great to say thank you for your service. You really want to make an impact though? Hey, $1, we can effectively minister to 7 individuals in this community.
So you would accept sponsorship from a civilian?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to be sure about that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, Kevin Weaver, thank you, and the Warrior's Journey for what you're doing.
Thank you.
On behalf of our nation and its strength and our veterans, we appreciate your faithfulness.
And Pastor, thank you for being a church that will bring this to the point of awareness, because it's important and it means a lot to me. Just be sitting here having this conversation with you. It's very special.
Well, it's our honor. We're all in this together. God bless you.
Amen. God bless you.